This conference will
Okay.
now be recorded.
Everyone hear that?
Yes. Shabbat
Yes.
Shalom, everyone. We're gathered together today on the 14th of February 2026, which I have to look up real quick. Please forgive me.
I put it in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
It's the 12th, or it's the 12th month, 7th day.
There we go. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry. I usually have that a little bit better, but I spaced right now. So the 7th day of the 12th month on our Creator's calendar coincides with the 14th of February 2026. And we are looking at something real quick that I had been talking about before we were recording. So this is also a question that our sister had. She just mentioned that she was going to ask me about it. But there is a phenomenon that we have modern Hebrew where people will use Elohim with an E, Elohim, and then they also will carry over this same phenomenon and they'll say Yeho instead of Yahoo for not only the beginning of our Creator's name on words like Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu, where you have it normally as Yahoo at the end, that used to be acknowledged and known. But even today, if you talk to some of the modern Hebrew speakers, they'll say Netanyahu's name is Netanyahu. Netanyahu. They've changed the way they pronounce the back end of it now. And it's because of this phenomenon that I'm about to talk to you about. But in modern Hebrew, they'll say like Zadok or Yehoshua, Yeho, um, instead of Yahoo, and they'll tell you that's the proper pronunciation. And I'm not going to disagree with the modern Hebrew. That may be the proper pronunciation. I don't know. I don't speak modern Hebrew or know very much about it. What I do know of it was that during the time that Bill Barrick was doing his Hebrew grammar class, that he has all of his YouTube videos available on the internet for free. It's 503 Hebrew grammar, and it's basic Hebrew grammar for biblical Hebrew. He explains in there that all of the half vowels, and there's four of them, the schwa, the hatuf sigol, the hatuf pathak, and the hatuf komets. Hatuf means half or reduced, right? And then the pathak, segol, and comments are all different vowel markers that they have that make particular sounds based on the word that's used for it. Pathak makes the ah sound. Segol makes the se, the a sound, right? Comments makes the ah sound. Kibbutz makes the sound. Shorik makes the right? So they have the word that they use for the vowel point. It's the sound that it makes, the vowel that they use for it. That's the key for the vowels. But either way, all of the half vowels, all of them for the biblical Hebrew would make the same sound. And it's always the A as in about, a short vowel syllable. Today they don't teach that. You can look online. You can go to the internet here and you can say Hebrew half vowel sounds. And then it'll tell you, you can go to the Nakud. Let me, so you can see about the schwa here. And notice that they have the E that's hyper, it's above, and it's a small E. That was one way that the translators would, or the scholars would put this sound to make it known that this was the schwa or the simple A sound. In previous forms, they would have it upside down. And they used to do that. You can still see that that's done when you look at like the interlinears online here. I had one open. This is from Malachi. Where is it? Malachi chapter 2. And when you look at any of the half sounds here, like the half vowel, the schwa, this is a schwa, and you see there's an upside down E. This is a schwa, that's that half vowel, and it's an upside down E. It doesn't do that for this one, but almost every one of them that you see the half vowel for, this one closes the syllable, so that's why you see the S at the end of this syllable. It doesn't make its own, but when it makes its own, the two dots will always have the E there. Let me find another example for you. Here's one with the resh with a schwa, or that it closes, sorry. Right here, the noon has the schwa that begins a syllable, and you see it's an upside down E. So all of them that do that in the biblical Hebrew follow the same principle that you see right here. And this was talked about, like I said, in Bill Berg's Hebrew grammar. It's also in the biblical study Hebrew grammar book that he recommends that you buy for his classes. Another place you can see this as a third witness, if you will, is right here. This is from the Encyclopedia Americana, Book 1, and it tells you in the beginning, this is the letter A. It's not exactly accurate in all of its history here because they turn away from what Scripture has to say on the topic, but the facts still remain. The English word abroad, the A as in abroad like father, represented the pronunciation by the schwa, or the upside down E. Right here you can see that it was the A as in father is the purest, simplest volic sound. And that was represented right here with the upside down E, as in historical and China, and the fact that it represents every vowel class, regardless of what vowel it came from, you can see right here. This is part of the keys to or the pronunciation key. If you go right here to the schwa, the upside down E, it tells you that it's unstressed vowels, as in China with an A, taken with an E, feudal with an I, connect with an O, and circus with a U. All of those make the sound in them. And that's what the schwa represents. In the biblical Hebrew, the schwa still does that very thing, which they just flipped it into an E. And that's that E before Elohim, for example. If we can find one on here. As you get an opportunity, you can stop these if you're looking and see every schwa, every half vowel that begins a syllable will always be that upside down E here. Right? All of those are supposed to make the A as in about. Here's the word for Elohim, and you can see it has an E, but that is the 2 dots for the schwa with the 3 dots for the segol, and that vowel together makes it the hatuf segol. That is the A as in about, just like the schwa. So that's the deception there. And this one is a minor one. Whether it's an E or an A really interchanges, because when you change this to L, just the E-L, or the Aleph Lamed, if you will, it actually pronounces as an E-L, right? Because right here, Al with a pathak and an A pronunciation means none or not, no. But L is mighty one. So the pronunciation makes all the difference in the world, even if the letters are the exact same in the Hebrew. And that's a key that we have to keep in mind. One difference between the Hebrew of old and English today, because English, German, Celtic all came from Hebrew, but it's a living language. It's changed over time. One of the differences here is that we have different spellings for different pronunciations now, even for the most part. But here and in the Hebrew, an aleph did not just make A sounds. It would make an O sound, it would make an E sound, it would be added to the letters that go with it to change the sounds, but it did not necessarily have a particular vowel of its own all the time. The ayin worked the same way, even though that's where we get the character, the letter for our O. It also made different sounds depending on what word it was in and how it was used. And that would be this letter right here. You can see it has that is a comets, I'm sorry. And it makes an ah. Right here, this is a segol, it makes an E. This is normally our letter A though, and this would be our letter O. So I'm not trying to confuse anybody. I'm just trying to explain the truth of things. How the Hebrew works with its letters, while very similar, like the vowels that we have in Hebrew, A, E, I, O, and U, are directly carried over into English. The way it's used in the words and how words are put together did not always stay the same because we didn't keep using the Hebrew. We lost it for, it devolved into runes. Then we lost the characters for the runes and adopted the Latin letters. So there's a different phenomenon for how things came down over time, but that's a different story. Point being, ob willing, you can see that this is a deception. And while this one isn't that big of a deal, when it comes to his name, it makes all the difference in the world. You can see here they have the schwa, but they'll put an A here. And that's honestly, I'm not talking about the last part. They weren't hiding it at this point. But it's hard to find that today, or they'll put yeho whenever they have this, they'll put a ye in the beginning and now at the ends, because they took that upside down E that was a scholarly marking that they knew was pronounced as an A as an about, and they just kept it there. So that's one of many things, and I'm not pointing fingers at any particular individuals. There might be a responsible party that you can point to in history, but ultimately, Scripture says that all errors stem from Satan, and he is the father of lies. Truth is in Yahushua, who is the Word, and he has no part in falsehood. That's why these things are important, to know the truth, to set us free from error. But either way, with that being said, did we have a consensus on what we wanted to do? Did we want to continue in Deuteronomy, or did we want to continue with someone might have their,
This conference will now be recorded.
it actually helps. Sorry about that. So we decided to go ahead and continue with reading Deuteronomy or Devarim. And I have to share my screen again, so please forgive me. There we go. But we decided to continue with our reading of Devarim this week. And we are currently on chapter 20. It has to do with the Kohen's exhortation to encourage the people to battle, and the law or the Torah in regard for what they're supposed to do there. The officer's proclamation who are to be dismissed from the war. How to use the cities that accept or refuse the proclamation of Shalom, and what cities must be devoted or put under the ban. And trees of man's meat must not be destroyed in the siege, or you don't cut down fruit trees to build siege weapons. And if you think about the literal application, you can turn that to the spiritual as well, thinking about what the fruits represent there. It says, and if you should go forth to war against your enemies, and should see horse and rider, and a people more numerous than yourself, you shall not be afraid of them, for Yahuwah your Elohim is with you, who brought you up out of the land of Mitzrayim. And he's a man of battle alone, he mentions, right? All over the scriptures, we're to be encouraged that it doesn't matter about any circumstances that we might find ourselves in, no matter the insurmountable seemingness of the odds against you. If Yahuwah is on your side, you have nothing to fear but him alone. There is no power in the world or outside of it that can stop him, period. A great example of that is in the Maccabean books. You can see what being hardcore for the truth and standing on that, regardless of who's against you, does for a small group of people. It says, and it shall come to pass whenever you shall draw nigh to battle, that the Kohen shall draw nigh and speak to the people, and shall say to them, Shema Yisrael, you are going this day to battle against your enemies. Let not your heart faint. Fear not, neither be confounded, neither turn aside from their face. For Yahuwah your Elohim, who advances with you to fight with you against your enemies, to deliver you. And the scribes shall speak to the people, saying, what man is he that has built a new house and has not dedicated it? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in the war, and another man dedicate it. And what man is he that has planted a vineyard and not been able and not been made merry with it? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man be made merry with it. And what man is he that has betrothed a wife and has not taken her? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man take her. Now, all of those are to put, when you think about this practically, he wanted to get rid of anyone who would have anything keeping them in a cowardly condition out of the army, so that nothing would hold them back from being full, no holds barred, doing what they're told for the truth, because that empowers him to do what he said. If they have anything holding them back or having any doubts or not giving their all, it will be reflected in their performance, which could cost them and other people their lives. It says, and the scribes shall speak further to the people and say, what man is he that fears and is cowardly in his heart? Let him go and return to his house, lest he make the heart of his brother fail as his own. And it shall come to pass, when the scribes shall have ceased speaking to the people, that they shall appoint generals of the army to be leaders of the people. And if you shall draw nigh to a city to overcome them by war, then call them out peaceably. Remember, he is love, right? And even when they're drawing to war with people, and Moshe is an example where he sued for peace first for these individuals, like Og, of Bashan. But you ask for shalom first, right? If then they should answer peaceably to you and open to you, it shall be that all the people found in it shall be tributary and subject to you. But if they will not hearken to you, but wage war against you, you shall invest it, until Yahuwah your Elohim shall deliver it into your hands, and you shall smite every male of it with the edge of the sword, except the women and the stuff and all the cattle, and whatsoever shall be in the city, and all the plunder you shall take as spoil for yourself. This is another witness here to what you can read plainly in Gad the Seer. I can't remember the exact chapter off the top of my head, but there's a section that talks about there is a shepherd of the people of Moab that is a shepherd for Dawid, and he asks him to let him become one of the people, to let him become circumcised and to become one with them and to keep the feast and do all that. And Dawid says that he's not allowed to. There's no Moabites allowed to enter the assembly, and he's not even allowed to desire or wish good for him, but what can he do for you? And the Moabites' response was, well, how is it possible that a Moabite can't enter? If your own grandmother was a Moabite and you're going to be the king. And he's like, oh, you've spoken to me defeating words. Let me inquire of Yahuwah about this. And then he asks to see the wonders out of his Torah because he's needing to know something that's now confusing him. Gad is given the answer, or Nathan, one of the two, but he's given a reply and it comes to him and he's told that he's a Moabite man, and it's the seed of the Moabite that you can see that was foretold to be cut off. We've read about that in the book of Yobelim specifically, where it mentions because of what the daughters of Lot had done, their children, the seed of Lot, would be cut off. But he explains in Gad there that the women are not the seed, it's the male line, just like the seed of Canaan. No one was supposed to marry the Canaanites because the seed of Canaan was going to be cut off. All the males that come from that. Although I do believe in that instance, it might have been everybody. There are exceptions to that. It's what's under the ban is also explained. But the point here is the phenomenon of the women being taken or not being taken under the ban because of the choice of the men, where the seed are cut off, is also reflected in the text here, although it's not explicitly gone over in detail. It's just what you see as the result. So, and you shall plunder and all the plunder you shall take as spoil for yourself, and shall eat all the plunder of your enemies whom Yahuwah your Elohim gives you. Thus shall you do to all the cities that are very far off from you, not of the cities of these nations which Yahuwah your Elohim gives you to inherit their land. You shall not take anything alive. And that might seem harsh, especially if you're only reading the Bible. The context that we've already covered, however, I'd like you to keep in mind that the sons of Noah swore an oath after they parted the land, and it was given to each of their children by lot. They swore before their father and creator that they would not take by force the land that belonged to their brothers. Ham was given Africa. Japheth was generally given the parts of Europe by the Mediterranean, all the way through over to China or Russia. And Shem was given the Middle East area, all the way to India. And from India being its western area, border Elam, Babylon, right, all the way to the Nile, the western side of the Gihon there, the Nile River, all of that was allotted to Shem, including what we call Turkey. Now, there has been intermixing lawfully without violence, like Madai coming to live in the Shem's allotment, which was foretold. And then you had some of the Hebrews and other Shemites going north and west and settling in Europe, some of them without violence, without fighting, by being allowed. And there was never anything against that. But when you took some by violence and force, like the Canaanites and what they had done, there is no forgiveness for that. And unless they leave, they're all going to be cut off because they broke the oath that they made. They made a covenant. They swore to keep their word, and they violated it. That kind of principle is very, very foundational. Our Creator is a covenant keeping and a covenant enforcing creator. He makes them and he enforces every one of them. Just like Zadik Yahu made a covenant with the king of Babel, and when he broke it, he was not allowed to stand. He was greatly diminished. So, not to get into that right now, but the point is, we swear oaths to the Constitution, a covenant with our Creator that's being violated. It is the same principle. We have no expectation of benefit in our life or in the afterlife. But and I mention all these things because they're practical, and all scripture is meant to be edifying and for our use. If we don't learn from the things we're reading, what's the point, right? What we can learn from these things are the echoes of how it's affected history all the way to our times, and why it's so important that we wake up from our stupor that we're in. I don't know about other people, but I swore an oath to the Constitution when I joined the Army, and there is no expiration on that. Their violation of it can be repented of, but you cannot die in sin and have a good end. That's just the way it is. So to continue here, it says, but you shall surely curse them, the Hittite and the Amorite and the Canaanite and the Pezerite and the Hivite and the Jebusite and the Girgashite, as Yahuwah your Elohim commanded you. Now, we've talked about it before, but just to mention, all of these are Canaanites. These are all branches that stayed in the land that became prevalent tribes of their own. But the ones here mentioned as Canaanites, just generally, these would have been what history calls the Hyksos. They were the shepherd king priests that lived over on the western side of the Nile that would invade into the they lived on the eastern side of the Nile, and they would invade into the western side of the Nile and took over for a while. They ruled over them, and they were shepherds that had a different type of religion than the other quote unquote Egyptians. They were ran out around the time that Abraham and Lot were in the land of Canaan, and they had to split up because there was no more room for them. That was when the general Canaanite population had left Egypt, and they were run off from the eastern side of the Nile River, and Egypt or Mitzrayim took control of that section for a while. That is where Goshen is, and that's the allotment that the Hebrews were given, which is really Shem's land anyways. But that's a different topic for another time. I'm just trying to give you context for why they're called Canaanites instead of having their own name too. This information about how they came over there and why they were called that is found in the book by a reverend that wrote Sanchonethos' Phoenician history from the excerpts of Eusebius and others. And he wrote a book about how that pagan history connected with the scriptures, and it follows Cain's line and how idolatry was reintroduced after the flood by Ham. So not to get too far into that again, we've mentioned these things for a few weeks ago. We were talking about it a little bit. I just want to remind you where that came from there. It also gives you an explanation for the Raphidim and the sons of Ham that were all over the Middle East and why they were there, what they were called, why they were giants in the land. It kind of covers those topics inadvertently. It also happens to cover the original foundings of colonies for people and how that ties in with the dispersion of the three sons of Noah after the flood and who was given what. So I haven't pieced everything together by any means, but the fact that we have secular history that actually covers facts and events that correlate directly with the Bible, and it ties in the timelines, it connects the antediluvian period to the Olympiads, which is known history. It helps put to bed the idea of millions of years of anything. And it's known from profane history that agrees with scripture. That was what the Reverend was trying to prove in his book that he wrote. And I believe that was from the 1700s or the 1500s, one of the two. But I'll share that again. If I can, I'll put a link for both the books in the description of the video. But to continue here, it says, they shall surely curse them, and they shall be cut off, right? That they may not teach you to do all their abominations, which they did to their mighty ones, which were men, right? So you should sin before Yahuwah, your Elohim. And we'll talk about it in the course of time, but to know about these things in detail, which the renewed covenant says it's not even pleasant to think about the things they do in secret, right? We're not even supposed to think about that kind of disgusting stuff. But for the purposes of what the truth has revealed, and I really don't like going beyond that, you can find out that these things are true in a variety of ways today. But you don't have to go beyond what is written and then see there's confirmation of it to be like, okay, his word is true. These things are real. We should fear for him and turn from it, right? To learn about what these things are, you can read in the Wisdom of Solomon, as it's called in English, or the Hokmah Shalomo. And in there, I believe it starts around chapter 12. There's also more in, I believe, chapter 14. It talks about generally the things that the Canaanites did in the land and how that's stuff that's still practiced by, people that are worshiping evil things today. And if you should besiege a city many days to prevail against it by war to take it, you shall not destroy its trees by applying an iron tool to them, but you shall eat of it and shall not cut it down. Is the tree that is in the field a man to enter before you into the work of the siege? But the tree which you know to be not fruit bearing, this you shall destroy and cut down, and you shall construct a mound against the city, which makes war against you, until it be delivered up. And cutting up the fruit trees, it's like cursing the ground. You're destroying the fruit of the ground. It's like fishing in the nurseries, the beds where the fish lay, is not supposed to be done, or killing a mother with its young is prohibited. Taking the mother and its eggs for birds is prohibited, right? These things are meant so that you can propagate the life and let the blessings continue. We'd call it common sense, but it's not something that you have to remember. If it's not in his word, if there is no Torah, there is no sin, there is no law against it. But these things are stuff that you can know from the law of nature, and it literally was written depending on where you look. We don't have anything in the Dead Sea Scrolls that I'm aware of today that covers these things in too much detail, except for the part with the bird and its eggs and maybe a deer and its young. But the law about the hunting and the fish beds is directly in the ancient history of Caledonia as part of their laws of the altar that they kept even before they got into their promised land. So it's something that they would have had before they even got the Torah, or what we call the Torah, which is the instructions given to Moshe on the mountain. It would have predated those times. All right, chapter 21, excuse me. It says the expiation of an uncertain murder, the usage of a captive taken to wife. The firstborn is not to be disinherited upon private affection. A stubborn son is to be stoned to death, and the malefactor must not hang all night of a tree. This is another part where you can see that the common law is literally used to be the law of the land for America, because that was our law for traitors. The worst punishment, the one that would curse a man, is to be hung from a tree, as we're going to read. And it was literally under USC section 18, title 18, for treason, that anyone who was convicted of treason would be hung from high noon till sunset, because that was the Torah. And our law literally followed the common law in its inception, We've just gone perverted because we've lost the use of the scriptures in our own minds and lives, which was intentional, but that's different. So, chapter 21. And if one be found slain with the sword in the land, which Yahuwah your Elohim gives you to inherit, having fallen in the field, and they do not know who has smitten, your elders and your judges shall come forth and shall measure the distances of the cities round about the slain. And it shall be that the city which is nearest to the slain man, the elders of that city shall take a heifer of the herd, which has not labored, and which has not borne a yoke. And the elders of that city shall bring down the heifer into a rough valley, which has not been tilled and is not sown, and they shall slay the heifer in the valley. And the Kohanim and the Luiim shall come, because Yahuwah Elohim has chosen them to stand by him, and to barak or bless in his name, and by their word shall every controversy and every stroke be. I want you to keep that in mind. The original sense of the covenant was that every firstborn that opened the womb would belong to him. And when that was forsaken because of the golden calf incident, and Moshe had said, everyone for Yahuwah to me, and the sons of Lui repented, it was given to them. Now, as a foreshadow of that, you should remember that the things that happened before are to teach us. It's going to be like foretelling in advance. So the fact that Louis was going to be given the kahuna was already foreknown, because their forefather Louis was literally given the kahuna. And then in the time that they were in the wilderness, it was lost. But Moshe and Aharon, the heirs of that, were still by our Creator given the prominence. He knew who were his. Aside from that, when they went out of the Mitzrayim, it was like the delivering them, it was a type of his deliverance at the end of the ages, where the best and brightest, the firstborn that opened the womb to him, the first fruits would be his. Hence the firstborn that opens the womb, as he was the firstborn that he took, so he was setting them apart unto himself. Now, that was put aside, or that was broken by the covenant, by the golden calf incident. The principle of it is now carried over to the Luiim, and that was fulfilled in what you saw with their father. Now they were given the kahuna. So the name Louis literally means joined unto me, and it's a type of the people that in the renewed covenant would be the best and brightest of the nations that would join unto him to serve him, who he, like the virgins that serve him, those that are emissaries, teachers, readers, the ones that are the luminaries or the overseers, the ones that strive to be servants of the people, get the greater reward in the afterlife, if you will. And they're one of only two types or three that are guaranteed the kingdom. And not only that, but they're given a place in the Shamayim like the messengers above, where Hanok was told is his rightful place. In right now he's in Eden, but he's going to be made like the messengers and be in the heavens or in the Shamayim as his dwelling place, where that is the 100-fold reward, as mentioned by Irenaeus and expounded by him about the parables of our Mashiach there. But either way, it was by their word that every controversy and every stroke would be, because they were explaining his word and being his mouth for the people. And all the elders of that city who draw nigh to the slain man shall wash their hands over the head of the heifer which was slain in the valley. And they shall answer and say, our hands have not shed this blood, and our eyes have not seen. Be merciful to your people, Yisrael, whom you have redeemed. Yahuwah, that innocent blood may not be charged on your people, Yisrael, and the blood shall be atoned for to them. Because if you recall, anyone who sheds man's blood, by man his blood must be shed. And only by shedding the blood of the one who did it can you make atonement. If you find someone murdered and you don't know who did it, this is a way for the guilt to be lifted off of the people who are not directly responsible. It says, and you shall take away innocent blood from among you, if you should do that which is tov and pleasing before Yahuwah your Elohim. And when you go out to war against your enemies, Yahuwah your Elohim should deliver them into your hands, and you should take their spoil, and should see among the spoil a woman beautiful in countenance, and should desire her, and take her to yourself for a wife. I've heard it said that some people say that you have to be racially exclusive and not intermingle with other people to keep the bloodlines pure. And they even say this of Hebrew Israelite movements, whether it's black or white or whatever. I've seen both. It's directly spoken against right here, where he gives no prohibition about doing that in normal circumstances. All right. We also have the examples in Scripture of people marrying outside of the land or outside of the tribe and it not being a sin to them, unless it was explicitly prohibited. But either way, it says, and should bring her within thine house, then shall you shave her head and pare her nails, and shall take away her garments of captivity from off her, and she shall abide in your house, and shall bewail her father and mother the days of a month. And afterwards you shall go into her and dwell with her, and she shall be your wife. And it shall be, you give them a chance to mourn, right? And it shall be, if you do not delight in her, you shall send her out free, and she shall not by any means be sold for money. You shall not treat her contemptuously, because you have humbled her. And if a man have two wives, the one loved and the other hated, and both the loved and the hated should have borne him, and the son of the hated should be firstborn, then it shall be that whensoever he shall divide by inheritance his goods to his sons, he shall not be able to give the right of the firstborn to the son of the loved one, having overlooked the son of the hated, which is the firstborn. But if he shall acknowledge the firstborn of the hated one to give him double of all things which shall be found by him, because he is the first of his children, and to him belongs the birthright. And I've never seen this abrogated in any instructions that we have. So if you have multiple children, there's nothing that says you ought to be doing differently here. Although you have different customs with different people, I wouldn't gainsay what the Torah says myself. And if any man has a disobedient and contentious son who hearkens not to the voice of his father and the voice of his mother, and they should correct him, and he should not hearken to them, then shall his father and his mother take hold of him and bring him forth to the elders of his city and to the gate of the palace. And they shall say to the men of their city, this our son is disobedient and contentious. He hearkens not to our voice. He is a reveler and a drunkard. And the men of his city shall stone him with stones, and he shall die. And you shall remove the evil one from yourselves, and the rest shall hear and fear. And that's the whole point. It mentions, I think it was the Romans. They would make displays of their punishments to men, not for the benefit of the one suffering, but to put the other people in compliance. And that was the whole point for this being such a stark thing. But when you think about it, this is exactly what he showed through his judgment already. When you had his children disobedient and contentious like a drunkard, just not listening to him in a simple thing of don't work on the Sabbath, right? You had the guy go out and pick up sticks contemptuously, just openly disobedient. What happened to him? He was brought out and he was stoned to teach them to hear and fear. And then you didn't see anyone else making that mistake again. That is the whole point. It's not to punish the people that do it. These people are already lost. It's to help the others that are there not turn to that kind of thing. And if there be any sin, and if there be sin in any one, the judgment of death be upon him, and he be put to death. You shall hang him on a tree. His body shall not remain all night upon the tree, but you shall by all means bury it in that day. For everyone that is hanged on a tree is cursed of Elohim, and you shall by no means defile the land which Yahuwah your Elohim gives you for an inheritance. And this is part of the reason why the other one is because it directly says as much in the apostolic constitutions. But Yahushua himself was impaled on the tree, if you will, or on the wooden stake, the cross beam that he carried. He was impaled at the 3rd hour through the 9th hour, to which he gave up the Ruach. And then it mentions that he was buried before sunset in the sepulcher that was not his own, the rich man's grave, if you will. That changes how a lot of people look at that part. But when you look at the calendar, as we've shared before, he died, and all of the dates for the calendar, when the Passover is, when the first fruits, when Shavuot, when the Feast of Tabernacles, they're all on a fixed date that never changes on the day of the week on his calendar, or the Gregorian. It will change on the Gregorian day. That will shift, but the day of the week never does. It's fixed. So it was always the 3rd day of the week that is the Passover. And when that happens, he died that day and he was buried before sunset. You have all that night, and then all of the 4th day, all of the 4th night, all of the 5th day, all of the 5th night, all of the 6th day, and part of the 6th night where he was in the grave. And then it says that he woke up, or he was risen before dawn of the weekly Shabbat. So you'd say before first light on the Sabbath, he was risen from the tomb when they arrived there, and it was still dark. And that, again, we've talked about that before, but when you see that as a picture of the truth through history, it's the interactions of the truth with man until the millennial reign, where the truth is risen and returned to us before the millennial reign happens. Consequently, when you look at how Rome puts it, he dies on the 6th day of the week. He's buried through the millennial and then risen on the Sunday, which is nothing. It's not. Everyone knows that's not true, or according to even what 3 days and 3 nights is. But that's all part of the no falsehood being of the truth, and why we have to be very careful about what we choose to believe. So chapter 22 here says, of mankind toward their brethren, the sex is to be distinguished by apparel. The dam or woman is not to be taken with her young ones. See, that's the thing I was mentioning with the deer there. The house must have battlements or a fence on the roof when it's a flat-topped roof and people can habit on it. Confusion is to be avoided. Fringes upon the vesture. The punishment of him that slanders his wife, of adultery, of rape, and of fornication, and incest rather. It says, when you see the calf of your brother or his sheep wandering in the way, you shall not overlook them. You shall by all means turn them back to your brother, and you shall restore them to him. And remember, you're supposed to do that even for your enemy, to help his donkey with its burden. And if your brother do not come nigh you, and you do not know him, you shall bring it into your house within, and it shall be with you until your brother shall seek them, and you shall restore them to him. Thus shall you do to his donkey, and thus shall you do to his garment, and thus shall you do to everything that your brother has lost. Whatsoever shall have been lost by him, and you shall have found, you shall not have power to overlook. You shall not see the donkey of your brother or his calf fallen in the way, and you shall not overlook them. You shall surely help them to raise them up. The apparel of a man shall not be on a woman, neither shall a man put on a woman's dress. For everyone that does these things is an abomination to Yahuwah your Elohim. And if you should come upon a brood of birds before your face in the way, or upon any tree, or upon the earth, young or eggs, and the mother be brooding, on the young or the eggs, you shall not take the dam with the young ones. You shall by all means let the mother go, but you shall take the young to yourself, that it may be well with you, and that you may live long. If you should build a new house, then shall you make a parapet to your house. So you shall not bring blood guiltiness upon your house, if one should in any wise fall from it. You shall not sow your vineyard with diverse seed, lest the fruit be devoted. And whatsoever seed you may sow, with the fruit of your vineyard. You shall not plow with an ox and a donkey together. You shall not wear a mingled garment, woolen and linen together. You shall make fringes on the four borders of your garment, or the four borders, it mentions upon the four, right? Quarters, or kanaf, which is the wings or the flap, right? People will say the hem, but the four hem of your garment does not quite make sense. You shall make fringes on the four borders of your garments, with whichsoever you may be clothed. And if anyone should take a wife and dwell with her and hate her and attach to her reproachful words. Okay, sorry, I thought it was going to go into more detail, but you get the full detail of this in Numbers or Bamidbar, chapter 15. And just the type of that you can see if you look at the sun during the day. The kanaf of the sun's garment would be the firmament is blue. The edges of the light there you can see the blue of the firmament. And that's just like the blue on the borders of your garment, depending on whatever it is you're going to wear. Some types of the Hebrews that came to America that became known as Indians had a complete blue around all the tassels of their garment there, or it was the hem, the edge. Some have carried it over into zitziot, like the ones you can just clip on a belt loop. The idea is to have blue thread attached to these on the corners of your garment so that when you perceive it, you'll remember his words to do them and not follow after your own stubborn heart. And that's a specific promise that he's given to his people. Whether you do that and receive it or not is entirely dependent upon you. So to continue here, it says, and if anyone should take a wife and dwell with her and hate her and attach to her reproachful words and bring against her an evil name and to say, I took this woman, and when I came to her, I found not her tokens of virginity. Then the father and the mother of the damsel shall take and bring out the damsel's tokens of virginity to the elders of the city to the gate. And the father of the damsel shall say to the elders, I gave this my daughter to this man for a wife, and now he has hated her, and attaches reproachful words to her, saying, I have not found tokens of virginity with your daughter. And these are the tokens of my daughter's virginity, and they shall unfold the garment before the elders of the city. I know this seems kind of grotesque there, but remember, women were under the dominion of their husband and fathers respectively. You can say it was like property, but that's somewhat demeaning. Women were very important to a man's life. I mean, it was a continuation of your seed, your family, everything. It was in the wife. It was the biggest decision you could have and make. She's your life partner and your helpmate, right? With that in mind, you don't want to be given the raw end of a deal in a covenant. And they took these things very seriously. The father there would have been having the sheets that they had used as proof of her virginity that he would show to the elders in case there was a dispute. And that was the way here that you would have lawful remedy against slander for your daughter. And the elders of that city shall take that man and shall chastise him, and shall fine him 100 shekels, and shall give to the father of the damsel, because he has brought forth an evil name against a virgin of Yisrael, and she shall be his wife. He shall never be able to put her away, meaning he couldn't divorce her if he wanted to. Another example of that is if a man takes a young woman and he doesn't ask the father to marry her, but just takes her to be his anyways. He's never allowed to divorce or put her away and be acceptable before our Creator, as we'll read in just a minute. It says, but if this report be true, and the tokens of virginity be not found for the damsel, then shall they bring out the damsel to the doors of her father's house, and shall stone her with stones, and she shall die, because she has wrought folly among the children of Israel to defile the house of her father by whoring. So you shall remove the evil one from among you. And if a man be found lying with a woman married to a man, you shall kill them both, the man that lay with the woman, and the woman, so shall you remove the wicked one out of Israel. And that's the Torah in regard to adultery. Both of them have to be punished, and if they're not, that's not doing right ruling. Now you can see why they were trying to trip up Yahushua with the adulterous woman without the man present, right? And if there be a young damsel espoused to a man, and a man should have found her in the city and have lain with her, you shall bring them both out to the gate of their city, and they shall be stoned with stones, and they shall die. The damsel because she cried not in the city, and the man because he humbled his neighbor's spouse. So shall you remove the evil one from yourselves. But if a man find in the field a damsel that is betrothed, and he should force her to lie with her, you shall slay the man that lay with her only, meaning she had no one to scream to, right? And the damsel has not committed a sin worthy of death, as if a man should rise up against his neighbor and slay him. So is this thing. Because he found her in the field, and the betrothed damsel cried, and there was none to help her. And if anyone should find a young virgin who has not been betrothed, and should force and lie with her, and is found, the man who shall lay with her shall give to the father of the damsel 50 silver drachma, and she shall be his wife. Because he has humbled her, he shall never be able to put her away. A lot of people misconstrue this and think that it's rape, but we already have the things for that. You can see if there's rape or a woman's not willing, that it's death to a man. But here, when you have a young virgin who's not betrothed and she does this with him, right? He's never to divorce her. He has to pay the father. The only exception is the father, if he refuses to let her marry him, he takes the money and the woman does not get to marry him because the father refused. That's his right to abrogate covenants when he hears about them. This is the man who lay with her shall give to the father the damsel 50 silver drachms, and she shall be his wife because he has humbled her. He shall never be able to put her away. A man shall not take his father's wife and shall not uncover his father's skirt. Now, this just mentions the father, but it mentions explicitly in the Dead Sea Scrolls that even if this is only given one context, it applies in every way that it can. So a man shall not take his mother's wife or his mother's, sorry, a woman shall not take his wife's or husband or his, uh, should not do the same thing to her sons as well, vice versa, and daughter or to her son. It applies equally in those instances, even if it is and the
This conference will now be recorded.
sorry about that. Having a little bit of volume or voice issues with my connection here. Please forgive us. I had been saying that the Dead Sea Scrolls explain that those laws are applicable and that they can apply, whether it's for men to women, women to men, fathers versus mothers, sons and daughters, etc. It applies in every way it should not be done or should be done effectively. But continuing here, and this is chapter 23, it says, who may not enter into the congregation, which we had just mentioned, one of them was the Moabites, right? Uncleanness to be avoided in the host. Whenever the camps of the armies were to go to battle, the messengers of Elohim were supposed to be fighting with them, right? Elohim was supposed to dwell in the camp, which means there could be no uncleanness, in it. No one personally unclean by anything that could make them that way. And then that includes touching the dead, being leprous, having defilement from whether you're having to use the restroom or something or procreating, right? There's different ways that you can become unclean. And if that's the case, you had to be outside the camp. It says, of the fugitive servant, of filthiness, of abominable sacrifices, of usury, which is a sad plague of our people today, of vows and of trespasses. He that is fractured or mutilated in his private parts shall not enter into the assembly of Yahuwah, right? The eunuch. Now, that doesn't mean that the eunuch can't serve him and keep his Sabbath. If you remember, Daniel was made a eunuch, and it was even foretold that that would happen to Hezekiah when he showed the kings or the people of Babylon his wealth. It was foretold that some of his children would be made eunuchs in Babylon there. And that's what happened to Daniel, who was greatly beloved, as it says in the scriptures. It mentions explicitly that those who are made eunuchs for the kingdom's sake have the reward like those who serve him like overseers, or the ones that are made virgins, guaranteed a place in the Shamayim. But this is a physical thing to teach a spiritual application here, right? One born of a harlot shall not enter into the assembly of Yahuwah. The Ammonite and Moabite shall not enter into the assembly of Yahuwah even until the 10th generation. He shall not enter into the assembly of Yahuwah, even forever, because they met you not with bread and water by the way, when you went out of Mitzrayim, and because they hired against you Balaam, the son of Beor, of Padan Aram, to curse you. But Yahuwah your Elohim would not hearken to Balaam, and Yahuwah your Elohim changed the curses into blessings, because Yahuwah your Elohim loved you. You shall not speak peaceably or profitably to them all your days forever, which is exactly what I told you Dawid said to him. He says, you can't join the assembly, nor can we speak words of shalom to you or do you well, but what can I do for you, right? You shall not abhor an Edomite, because he is your brother. You shall not abhor a Mitzrayite, because you were a stranger in his land. If sons be born to them in the 3rd generation, they shall enter into the assembly of Yahuwah. And that's encouraging for us, especially when you think about the spiritual applications, okay? And if you should think about the Reformation, generations after the Reformation and the benefits that came from that. And if you should go forth to engage with your enemies, then you shall keep you from every wicked thing. If there should be in you a man who is not clean by reason of his issue by night, then he shall go forth out of the camp, and he shall not enter into the camp. And it shall come to pass toward evening, he shall wash his body with water, and when the sun has gone down, the cutting off of the light, a type of our Mashiach, right? He shall go into the camp, and you shall have a place outside of the camp, and you shall go out there. And you shall have a trowel on your girdle. And it shall come to pass when you would relieve yourself abroad, that you shall dig with it, and shall bring back the earth and cover your nuisance. Because Yahuwah your Elohim walks in your camp to deliver you, and to give up your enemy before your face, and your camp shall be set apart, and there shall not appear in you a disgraceful thing, and he shall turn away from you. And so he shall turn away from you, right? You shall not deliver a servant to his master who is coming from his master attaches himself to you. Remember, it mentions in the renewed covenant that the bondman is free in Mashiach, right? He shall dwell with you, and he shall dwell among you where he shall please. You shall not afflict him. There shall not be a harlot of the daughters of Yisrael, and there shall not be a fornicator of the sons of Yisrael. There shall not be an idolatress, of the daughters of Yisrael, and there shall not be an initiated person of the sons of Yisrael. Okay, now this one says sodomite of the sons, or whore of the daughters, and you can see that is kadosha and kadosh, or kadesh. It's literally, they say devotee there, but it means to be set apart. That's all that word is distinguished, set apart, separated. You can be set apart to him and for tov or beneficial purposes, to be set apart to Yahuwah your Elohim, or you can be set apart to idolatrous uses or temple prostitution, which is what this was talking about. You shall not bring the hire of a harlot nor the price of a dog into the house of Yahuwah your Elohim for any vow, because even both are an abomination to Yahuwah your Elohim. You shall not lend to your brother on usury of silver, or usury of meat, or usury of anything which you may lend out. So when you lend, you ask for what our Mashiach told us even in the renewed covenant, you don't require it back. You let them give it back if they're able and can, let them do the right thing, but you don't nag them for it. Here, it tells you plainly that you don't charge interest for anything you lend to your brother. It's to be what they can return from the same thing, right? You may lend on usury to a stranger, but to your brother you shall not lend on usury, that Yahuwah your Elohim may barak you in all your works upon the land, into which you are entering to inherit it. And if you will vow a vow to Yahuwah your Elohim, you shall not delay to pay it, for Yahuwah your Elohim will surely require it of you, and it shall be sin in you. But if you should be unwilling to vow, it is not sin in you. And that's what Ecclesiastes goes into, and especially the renewed covenant where it says, don't swear at all. Let your yes be yes, and your no be no, and what goes beyond these is of the wicked one, it mentions. It says, you shall observe the words that proceed from between your lips, and as you have vowed a gift to Yahuwah Elohim, so shall you do that which you have spoken with your mouth. And that's a very, very important thing, especially for a man. Okay. And if you should go into the vineyard of your neighbor, you shall eat grapes sufficient to satisfy your desire, but you may not put them into a vessel. And if you should go into the field or the cornfield of your neighbor, then you may gather the ears with your hands, or the kernels, right? But you shall not put the sickle to your neighbor's corn. And this is where our Mashiach got the idea for his taught ones to pluck the heads of grain on the Sabbath and eat it, because they were in the neighbor's field and they were hungry. They were only following what was enjoined that they could do. But because of the added bonds of the fences around the Torah that were put up by men, they considered it wrong to pluck heads of grain on the Sabbath, when that was nowhere expressly said. It doesn't say anywhere that you can't do that to satisfy your being. Remember, it's right to do tov on the Sabbath, and you have to eat. They weren't cooking food or preparing anything. They were just what was readily available, right? So this is part of using righteous judgment that he talks about. If they're going to make offerings and sacrifices morning and evening on the Sabbath and do the perpetual Sabbath sacrifices that are required by law, and they're told to break the Sabbath and yet be guarding his word, and they're approved, there's so much more to it when you're doing right and not hurting or violating anything. Just like Dawid with the showbread that was no longer being used, and now that was permissible for him to eat, even though it's not given for him for that purpose, right? So, all willing, we can see that. And this doesn't mean that we can be willy-nilly with what is written. We should never go beyond what is said. The point is to use his words to make righteous decisions. So, chapter 24, this is of divorce. A new married man goes not to war, which we already read, of pledges, of man stealers or kidnappers, of leprosy, and the hire is to be given. And then it says of justice and of charity, which is another word for love in what First Clement to the Corinthians there, he uses charity instead of the word love. It says, and if anyone should take a wife and should dwell with her, then it shall come to pass, if she should not have found favor before him, because he has found some unbecoming thing in her, that he shall write for her a bill of divorcement, and give it into her hands, and he shall send her away out of his house. And this was given, as Yahushua said, because of the hardness of our hearts. But from the beginning, it was not so. And after he came, this is no longer permissible. He says that anyone who marries a woman who's been put away commits adultery, and the woman commits adultery. But it says, and if she should go away and be married to another man, and the last husband should hate her and write for her a bill of divorcement, and should give it to her, or give it into her hands, and send her away out of his house, and the last husband should die, he or who took her to himself for a wife, right, the former husband who sent her away shall not be able to return and take her to himself for a wife after she has been defiled, because it is an abomination before Yahuwah your Elohim. And you shall not defile the land which Yahuwah your Elohim gives you to inherit. That one reads a little different. Let me see. Yeah, it says, and if he sends her away, or if the latter husband dies, right? So it's not and, but or. That's why I thought that was weird. The idea here and what was originally given is that it's unclean to take back a wife that's been defiled. As you can see, Jacob never again lay with Bilhah after she was defiled by his son Reuben. He left her alone. I think you can see the same thing with David's wives or concubines who were defiled by his son. He never went to them again. But our Mashiach explicitly says, look, is it not, and he talks about this in the foretellers, is it not greatly unclean for a woman to come again to her husband after she's been defiled? But yet I've said, return to me. And he wanted them to come back and be true to him. And he came and died to make that reconciliation, which is the key. It mentions when a woman is bound to her husband as long as her husband lives. But when the husband dies, then that makes way for her to remarry, particularly the one who was raised from the dead. And if anyone should have recently taken a wife, he shall not, I was reading this, make sure I didn't miss anything, I'm sorry. He shall not go out to war, neither shall anything be laid upon him. He shall be free in his house. For 1 year he shall cheer his wife whom he has taken. You shall not take for a pledge the under millstone, nor the upper millstone, for he who does so takes life for a pledge. And the millstone's what you ground your flour for to make bread, right? And if a man should be caught stealing one of his brethren of the children of Yisrael, and having overcome him, he should sell him, that thief shall die. So shall you remove that evil one from yourselves. And again, that is also part of the common law. It's still in the books in our country, if I remember correctly, under the title for kidnapping. If you get caught with a kidnapping, that's a death sentence, especially even if under color of law for treason. So like police officers that unlawfully detain you, it's considered kidnapping if they arrest you, and it's not a real lawful injury to a person reason. Now, they're not actually suffering for the crimes that they're doing in this life right now, because the people are generally sinning against our maker. So their enemies have rule. But that doesn't mean they won't be corrected, right? That's the problem that we have. If we really care about people, we wouldn't want them to do that to themselves or us. It says, take heed to yourself in regard of the plague of leprosy. You shall take great heed to do according to all the law, which the Kohanim, the Leviim, shall report to you. Take heed to do as I have charged you. Remember all that Yahuwah, your Elohim, did to Mitzrayim in the way when you were going out of Mitzrayim, or Egypt. If your neighbor owes you a debt, any debt whatsoever, you shall not go into his house to take his pledge. You shall stand without, and the man who is in your debt shall bring the pledge out to you. A man's castle is where he's king, right? You don't go into, you wouldn't want that done to you, so you don't do it to them. Pretty simple, right? And if the man be poor, you shall not sleep with his pledge. You shall surely restore his pledge at sunset, and he shall sleep in his garment, and he shall bless you, and it shall be mercy to you before Yahuwah, your Elohim. You shall not unrighteously withhold the wages of the poor and needy of your brethren, or of the strangers who are in your cities. You shall pay him his wages the same day. The sun shall not go down upon it, because he is poor and he trusts in it. And he shall cry against you to Yahuwah, and it shall be sin in you. The fathers shall not be put to death for the children, and the sons shall not be put to death for the fathers. Every one shall be put to death for his own sin, or what we call blood guilt, right? You shall not wrest the judgment of the stranger and the fatherless and widow. You shall not take the widow's garment for a pledge. And you shall remember that you were a bondman in the land of Egypt, and Yahuwah your Elohim redeemed you from thence. Therefore I charge you to do this thing. And when you shall have reaped corn in your field, and shall have forgotten a sheaf in your field, you shall not return to take it. It shall be for the stranger and the orphan and the widow, that Yahuwah your Elohim may bless you in all the works of your hands. And if you should gather your olives, you shall not return to collect the remainder. It shall be for the stranger and the fatherless and the widow. And you shall remember that you were a bondman in the land of Egypt. Therefore I command you to do this thing. And whensoever you shall gather the fruits or the grapes of your vineyard, you shall not glean what you have left. It shall be for the stranger and the orphan and the widow. And you shall remember that you were a stranger, a slave or bondman in the land of Mitzrayim. Therefore I command you to do this thing. All right, I think we might be able to get one more in here. This is chapter 25. It says, stripes must not exceed 40, and that's the chastisement that you receive for correction there. The ox is not to be muzzled, of raising seed unto a brother, of the immodest woman, of unjust weights, and the memory of Amalek is to be blotted out. So hopefully here, even now, you can see there's benefit in knowing and studying these things, especially right here. There's an application from the renewed covenant where it talks about this in particular, that you shall not muzzle an ox that treads out the corn. Shaul says that, and he says, is it with beasts that our Mashiach or our creator is concerned, or is this not about men? If you're not to muzzle the ox that treads out the corn, what about a man being worthy of his labors and his wages, right? That's the application that it was applied to in the renewed covenant context there. So anything here where you can see equality or equanimity, being right or having requital, the right recompensing for things, is how it should apply between man, between man and beast, and how you treat others with love, respect, and compassion, right? What you can actually do to show those things. It says, if there should be a dispute between men, and they should come forward to judgment, and judge, and justify the righteous, and condemn the wicked, then it shall come to pass, if the unrighteous should be worthy of stripes, you shall lay him down before the judges, and they shall scourge him before them according to his iniquity. And they shall scourge him with 40 stripes in number. They shall not afflict more. For if you should scourge him with more stripes beyond these stripes, your brother will be disgraced before you. You shall not muzzle the ox that treads out the corn. If the brethren should live together, and one of them should die, and should not have seed, the wife of the deceased shall not marry out of the family, to a man not related. Her husband's brother shall go into her, and shall take her to himself for a wife, and shall dwell with her. And it shall come to pass that the child which she shall bear shall be named by the name of the deceased, and his name shall not be blotted out of Yisrael. Now, that phenomenon you can see very prevalent all throughout what is called the ancient history of Caldonia, where they would habitually, as part of the law of their altar, they would name their firstborn son the exact name of their father. So most of the kings were Donald until another one took the throne for one reason or another. The Donald that was in succession passed away. And Donald was from Daniel, or my judge is El. You have it very prevalent where Don, especially in Spanish, is a type for a leader and a judge. And that was part of how that word came out in the Celtic there too. But he was the king. The MacDonald clan there was the royal line for a long time. Point being, they all had the commandment to name their firstborn after the name of the father, to carry down his name so it would not be blotted out among the people. And that is a type that they pick up from our Father, who named his son after him in the very same manner. We don't say Junior, but in essence, that's what he would be. We know that his name is Yahuwah, Yahushua, in full. He was given the Father's name, and when he came in the flesh, he was given the name Yahushua, right? But either way, it says, and if the man should not be willing to take his brother's wife, then shall the woman go up to the gate to the elders, and she shall say, my husband's brother will not raise up the name of his brother in Yisrael. My husband's brother has refused. And the elders of his city shall call him and speak to him. And you see an example of this in the book of Ruth, if you remember, with Boaz and his calling his relation to see if he wanted to marry her first. And they shall speak to him, and if he stand and say, I will not take her, then his brother's wife shall come forward before the elders, and shall loose one shoe from off his foot, and shall spit in his face, and shall answer and say, thus shall they do to the man who will not build his brother's house in Yisrael. And that is carried down from what the brothers, the 12 or the 11, 10, if you will, did to Yahusuf when they were mistreating him and sold him into slavery. As they did to him, it was done unto them. They had spit upon him and were disrespectful, and then they bought sandals to say they were going to trample upon his dreams of him ruling over them. And in 360 of that, when they came into the land and were regarded as spies, they had their sandals taken off and thrown at them, and they were spit upon and disrespected. And then it came about that they did bow down and worship the one who was foretold that they would there anyways. But after that phenomenon, it was established that anyone who would not build up the house of their brother or tried to kill off their brother's seed in that way would be disrespected in this manner to remind them of that. It says, and his name shall be called in Yisrael, the house of him that has had his shoe loosed. And if men should strive together, a man with his brother, and a wife of one of them should advance to rescue her husband out of the hand of him that smites him, and she should stretch forth her hand and take hold of his private parts, you shall cut off her hand. Your eyes shall not spare her. If you shall not have in your bag, or you shall not have in your bag diverse weights, a great and a small. You shall not have in your house diverse measures, a great and a small. You shall have a true and just weight, and a true and just measure, that you may live long upon the land which Yahuwah your Elohim gives you for an inheritance. For everyone that does this is an abomination to Yahuwah your Elohim, even everyone that does unrighteousness or injustice. Right? Everyone who does evil, right? They say evil right there. But that would have been Iwal, right? There was no V there before. But that's where we get the word for evil. Right? Remember what things Amalek did to you by the way when you went forth out of the land of Mitzrayim, how he withstood you in the way and harassed your rear, even those that were weary behind you, and you did hunger and were weary, and he did not fear Elohim. And it shall come to pass, whenever Yahuwah your Elohim shall have given you rest from all your enemies round about you, in the land which Yahuwah your Elohim gives you to inherit, you shall blot out the name of Amalek from under the Shemaim, and shall not forget. Now, this was actually accomplished during the time of the Babylonian captivity, or afterwards, if you will, in the reign of the Median Persian Empire. You can read about it in Josephus and in the book of Esther, or Chadesha, where there is a plot amongst Haman, and he raises up a plot in the Persian kingdom to wipe out the Yahudim, but it turns against him, and everyone that was going to do that to them had it happen to them instead. Josephus explains, when you read the accounts in his writings, that it was the descendants of Amalek throughout that Persian kingdom who were working with Haman, who was also a descendant of Amalek, to perpetrate that violence against the people, and that it was returned against them, and that was the fulfillment of Amalek being wiped out there at that time. That's a type and picture of the sure word of foretelling, if you will, that those that are robbing and abusing and plundering you will be requited, right? But I believe, if we look at that right, Amalek was of the sons of Edom. I have to double check, but it's something to do with that, if I remember. And when you go back to the account in the wilderness, while they were traveling, they had grumbled and complained, and they are having some issues. And then Amalek rose up and attacked them. It got them from the rear, their stragglers with the young and the enfeebled, and attacked them from that end. And that was when Moshe commanded Yahushua the next day to fight against them. And he was on the mountain with Hur and Aharon, where he had his staff risen. And whenever he had his staff raised, they would have victory. And when he lowered it, they were being overcome, right? Just to remind you of that. But I think that's going to cover things for today. So you all have a great Sabbath, the rest of your day there. Shabbat Shalom. A wonderful week ahead. Shavua Tov. And we will talk to you next time. Shalom.